Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Matt Lowe. Matt, first of all, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Tom. Excited for our conversation today.
Matt, could you start by telling us a little bit about your professional background and your current role?
So, I'm an engineer by training, spent a number of years in the medical device industry before I landed at MasterControl and have been here at MasterControl for the past 18 years now. Have done most roles in the company, and I guess that what qualifies you to be a chief strategy officer. You've done a little of a lot of things.
Tell us a little bit about Master Control.
Sure. So MasterControl is a provider of quality management and manufacturing execution system to the life sciences market.
Uh, so, first of all, I'm a son of an engineer, so I have some inkling of engineering mentality. But what I find so intriguing about that, Matt, is many of the listeners to this podcast are in the compliance realm.
Yep.
They are in healthcare, fintech, financial services, et cetera. And I have found some of the most innovative people and innovative companies in compliance are amazingly not lawyers. And to have an engineer bringing an engineer discipline and an engineer perspective to what otherwise might be thought of as a compliance requirement or even a business process was one of the reasons I was so intrigued by about talking to you. So with that almost long-winded introduction, uh, could you tell us about how Master Control is incorporating AI into your own software solution?
It seems like hardly a day goes by now where you're not talking about AI in one form or another. And that's certainly been the case here at Master Control. We entered beta on our first AI enabled feature in our solution back at the beginning of this year. And it's really focused around compliance in the training framework. So in life sciences, part of the regulations is you've got to have objective evidence that folks have been properly trained to policies, procedures, the things that you expect them to do the job that they're performing. And one way to get that objective evidence is through exams or tests. And so we have leveraged generative AI to auto create comprehension based exams on an individual company's policies and procedures. So something that would have taken a compliance focused training person, coordinator, several hours to understand the content, write the questions, vet the question, load it into a system, all those things can now be done in a matter of minutes. So really simple use case, but hugely beneficial to folks in the life sciences industry.
Matt, that experience mimics a little bit of my own, which is when I first started investigating ChatGPT and generative AI, I found it made me more efficient.
Yes.
The second thing was I felt like I did when I was, I think, 11 or 12 when my parents bought my sister and I Encyclopedia Britannica. I thought that was the greatest thing ever. Literally, I had a set of books from A to Z. And I was a geek back then. I just didn't call it that. And I would read the encyclopedia. But now I'm beginning to understand that is 2 to 5% of the power of generative AI. So I was wondering, with that lead in,
Mhm.
are you now being able to incorporate some of the more other aspects of generative AI? And more importantly, do your clients and customer base understand the real power you and Master Control can put in their hands?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Much like yourself, I think our industry in life sciences is just beginning to scratch the surface of the power of generative AI and the use cases where it can be employed. I mean, one of the big areas for us being a quality management vendor, for example, is moving from a reactive stance around quality and compliance and shifting more toward predictive. How do we find things before they occur so that we can stop them from happening rather than putting corrective action or remediating action in place after they've already gone wrong? And that identifying patterns and predicting is really the strength of these new tool sets that can scan just massive amounts of data that would have been impossible for us as humans previously. So this is really excited about the time we find ourselves in.
Before we, and I do want to go down the rabbit trail on that with you,
Yep.
but before we do, I want to step back and ask about quality assurance. And once again, by way of introduction, I had a colleague in Houston who was a chief compliance officer, and she was hired away from NASA, where she was a QA/QC officer. She was the
Okay.
only quality assurance person I've ever heard moving into compliance. And once again, her perspective was so different
Mhm.
that she brought uniqueness to her program and was innovative just because she thought different than everyone else.
Yep.
So with that, also with that introduction, could you explain MasterControl's role in the quality assurance industry?
Yeah, certainly. So, that quality assurance mindset, really the objective of the profession is to ensure that you're putting the highest quality product out the door as possible. Hence the two words together, assuring quality. Master Control's role in that is making the quality assurance profession easier to execute. So we are automating a lot of the tasks via digitization and workflow automation, and now beginning to introduce the AI tools to where folks can do more with less. I think we're all being asked to do that today. And we really want to play a central role in that.
Now let's go back to that rabbit hole because you've opened up a conversation I've been wanting to have for quite some time. And there are a lot of people like me, I think, that are starting to have that conversation. But you guys are really a little more advanced than where I am. And how can a compliance professional think about the benefits that might come from AI implementation? And you may have actually answered that with sort of the gold ring of prevention rather than even detection.
Mhm. Yeah. So think about it this way. And this is taking even a broader compliance mindset than just life sciences, where we typically play. Compliant always has a set of rules, a framework of regulations to which we are trying to comply. Think about being able to take a large language model, feed that compliance model into it. At the same time, feed your control set for the compliance framework, whether that's Sarbanes-Oxley or it's FDA regulations, TGA in Australia, whatever it may be. By bringing those two things together in a large language model, you can now identify the places where you basically are mapping your controls to the standard or the regulation that you're trying to comply with. And at the same time, you're able to identify gaps in the controls based on the framework upon which the large language model is trained. So now you're getting into this spot of, whoa, I can prevent a problem in an audit down the road or whatever it may be because now I know what my gaps are. And then you take it even a step further and say, draft for me a control that will meet this particular standard or regulation. And now you can see how much more efficient we can become as compliance profession. Mhm.
One of the services I have provided over the years has been a gap analysis.
Huh?
And could be 20 hours, it could be 100 hours. But that's just the starting point. That's just figuring out where the gaps are. Then
Mhm.
you've got to figure out the control. And what you've described is something that every company absolutely needs to have, and public companies have to have it for Sarbanes-Oxley alone,
Yeah.
let alone
Yep.
everything else. So that this could be really an exponential shift, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Elon Musk, I think it was last week, made the bold statement that AI will take all of our jobs. And having a job will be an option in the future, like a hobby. And I don't know if it'll go that far, but it will certainly make almost all of us much more efficient in what we're doing.
I, for one, have always embraced technology. I'm thrilled by it. I see everything as an iteration of what was built for, meaning essentially, if you're not standing in their shadows, you're standing on their shoulders. Is is my type of approach, or my at least philosophical mentality, what you see in your customer base? Is there just an eagerness to embrace this, recognizing that they may all take our jobs and we can become much, much better at what we do?
Yeah, it's funny. I often say excitement and anxiety are the same emotion. They feel the same. And I think the leveraging of AI in particular evoke both of those emotions. People are excited, but at the same time anxious about what does this mean for the future and what I do and the way I do things. But I think it's a reality that we're all going to have to adapt to and understand, how do we use this in the right way to make me better at what I do? And I believe strongly in human in the loop. Yeah, AI is great at some things. When it gets it wrong, it gets it really wrong. And so that human in the loop really becomes a critical component to making sure this doesn't jump the tracks in a way that is unexpected.
I teach a college class in compliance, and this year, unlike last year, I told the students that you can completely use generative AI. You can completely use GPT, and you can use it on the final examination with the following caveat: understand that if you get something, it's a first draft.
Yep.
And you may have heard the story about the lawyer who turned in a brief. It was ChatGPT wrote, and it was wrong. And we all laughed at that. What an idiot. Except that for me, it was actually a very important lesson, which is number one, that Chat GPT, whatever it gives you, is a first draft.
Yep.
But two, you have to check everything. Is that message resonating with your customer base? That yes, it can give you some information, but you have to check that either through your own knowledge or additional research to make sure that, as you said, what you're given doesn't take you off the rails.
I think that is one of the advantages we have in the life sciences is the outcomes can have very extreme effects on human life. And so, making sure that anything you're using AI for goes through a process of that human in the loop where you're making sure it's right. Hallucination, especially in generative AI, it's a real thing. Like the lawyer with the brief, it will make stuff up. So you've got to be able to recognize that, be able to backstop that with either your own knowledge or your own research. We are working on AI that will spot hallucinations and bring those up so that they're easier to identify. But again, you're relying on machines to do a job where they may get something wrong.
I got somebody at the door, so
No worries.
the dog's cleared out. Uh, Matt, I'd like to spend a few minutes maybe walking our listeners through some of the keys that you see in implementing AI in the life sciences, so that perhaps, as we would say in compliance, can or should you start with low hanging fruit or a simple project?
Yep. Yeah, I think in the life sciences, a kind of our default mode is to take a risk-based approach. And I don't know why we wouldn't apply the same principle with the use of a start with uh, low risk items, things that aren't going to kill someone. That's probably a good place to start. And similar to the approach that we've taken here at Master Control, auto generation of comprehension exams probably aren't going to kill anyone, but we can learn a lot about the way the AI is behaving, about the way our data stream has been established, and is that pipeline set up the right way? So, kind of stepping into this a little bit at a time, I think is the right approach generally, but maybe even more so in life sciences.
I had never thought of this as a risk based approach, but it makes absolute sense. And it makes even more sense because every compliance professional understands that.
Yep.
And I continually talk about if there's a risk, you assess that risk. With that assessment, you put a risk management strategy in place. You train your employees on it. You then implement the risk management strategy, but you monitor to determine effectiveness and approve or remediate as appropriate. And did I hear you say it's that process?
It's exactly what we're talking about here. I mean, you think about your use cases where you'd like to apply AI, put it through your risk assessment, mitigation, and management tools to determine, is this appropriate? And I think as we gain more and more learning on use cases, we'll be able to push that risk further and further.
And really start out not with low hanging fruit, but low risk.
Yes, exactly. It could have tremendous impact or benefit, but it's low risk. Those are the ideal items to really automate with artificial intelligence.
Do your customers and client base understand the approach that you've just outlined? Is that something they're comfortable with?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I say, this is kind of our default approach in life sciences. And so the folks that I've spoken with and collaborated with, we are of like mind. We definitely see the applicability of the approach and why it makes sense for our particular industry.
The how do we I don't want to say get this word out because it's you do it through podcasts or other forms of media, but in the industry that you play in and in the customer base of Master Control, are these discussions really going on an ongoing basis, literally industry wide?
Yeah, I think we're right at the beginning of that. It's reached a point where it's mainstream enough that folks are beginning to come together in consortiums and councils, associations to talk about, where should we be using this? Where should we not be using it? What are the ethics involved? Just recently, I joined one called CHAI. I think it's the Convention for Healthcare AI, where you've got industry and regulators coming together, folks from the FDA, for example. I think we're going to need more and more of this as we better understand what the capabilities are or are not.
Man, I used to end podcasts with a question along the lines of where do you see this, whatever the issue of the podcast has been, down the road in 2030? Uh, when it comes to AI, I don't think we can ask that question because we're literally changing, if not annually, every 18 months.
Oh, yes.
So perhaps excuse, where you see AI in life sciences in 2025, literally 18 months from now.
Yep. I think about it in the context of what we do at Master Control, and we're a software applications provider. I think this idea of software applications generally is really going to transform to where your primary interface is a chatbot like ChatGPT, where you're asking, hey, how do I go about this? It returns to you the answer. And then you say, oh, can you walk me through that? Yeah, here are the steps. What does that look like? Show me a video. I mean, you're literally interacting with a machine in the way that you and I are interacting today, but the machine is this all-knowing being that possesses all the information that you need. And that is just a radically different way for us to think about doing our jobs and getting the information we need.
Matt, unfortunately, now we are at the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted more information on Master Control or to perhaps connect with you or find out more information, what might be the best place or places for them to go?
Certainly. Please look up our website, mastercontrol.com. We're at industry events. Stop by and see us there. If folks want to connect with me via LinkedIn, it's just Matt M. Lowe. I'd be happy to chat more about any of this. It's exciting stuff.
Matt, I hope we can continue this conversation.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate the time today.